Dr. Carver didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for the phone or call in a nurse. He just set the paper down. Very slowly, the way you set something down when you're afraid it might break the table. Then he looked at me, Henry Marshall, and he said nothing for what felt like 5 full heartbeats. 5 heartbeats is a long time when a child is curled up against your chest. 5 heartbeats is forever when that child is your granddaughter. Sir, his voice came out careful, measured, the way you talk to someone when you're not sure what they're going to do next. How long has she been drinking this juice? Sophie, 8 years old as of last Tuesday, the reading award girl I'd let down, was out cold against my shoulder. Not napping. Not dozing. Out. The kind of sleep that doesn't belong on a Saturday afternoon at 3:30 in a pediatric clinic off Coleman Boulevard in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. I looked at her face, then back at Dr. Carver. I don't know, I said. That's why we're here. He sat down across from me, turned the paper around so I could read it myself. Clonidine. You might know it as a blood pressure medication. Perfectly harmless at the right dose for the right reasons. But the results showed concentrations, his exact words, consistent with repeated administration beyond any prescribed pediatric dosage. Not an accident. Not once. Repeated. Beyond prescribed. I read that line 3 times. Then I folded my hands on my knee, and I breathed in through my nose and out through my mouth, the way I do when a mechanism I'm working on turns out to be more broken than I thought. Is her mother home right now? Dr. Carver asked quietly. Yes. Mr. Marshall, I'm legally required to report this. I know. I met his eyes. Give me until Monday morning. He studied me for a long moment. Whatever he saw must have told him something. That I wasn't going to drive back to North Charleston and put my fist through a wall. That I wasn't going to do anything loud or fast or reckless, even though every single gear inside my chest had locked up tight. Monday, he said, finally, 8 a.m. If I haven't heard from you by then, I make the call myself. Understood. We shook hands. I carried Sophie to my car, buckled her into the back seat, tucked Buttons the bear under her arm where he belonged. Started the engine of my 2007 Buick LeSabre, dark blue, the car Martha always said drove like a living room on wheels. The drive back to my place in downtown Charleston took 22 minutes. I know because I counted every one of them. Sophie slept the whole way, mouth slightly open, one small hand wrapped around that old bear, like even in sleep she knew to hold on to something safe. Welcome to Dad's raw revenge. Get comfortable and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to do the right thing. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to want to hear all of this. Let me go back. 4 hours. Same day. Saturday, October 12th. Around 1:30 in the afternoon. Sophie's school reading award ceremony had been the previous Tuesday. She'd won first place, stood up in front of the whole second grade, and read a passage from Charlotte's Web so clearly that her teacher called it remarkable. I wasn't there. Not because I didn't want to be. Not because I forgot. I'd been locked up with a flare in my hands, the same arthritis I've been negotiating with since 2017. The kind that turns your fingers into strangers. And by the time the swelling went down enough to grip a steering wheel, the ceremony was over, the certificate was framed, and my granddaughter had stood at that podium without me in the audience. That bothered me more than the hands ever did. I kept picturing her up there, looking out at the chairs, scanning for my face. So Saturday, October 12th, around 1:30, I put on a clean shirt, loaded a bag of books into the passenger seat. Her gift, 3 chapter books I'd picked out myself from the shop on King Street, and I drove from my place off Meeting Street in downtown Charleston, out toward North Charleston. The plan was simple. Drop off her books, take her for ice cream at the place on Rivers Avenue she likes, let her tell me everything I missed, every detail, every word she read, every kid who clapped. Just be present. Just be Grandpa. 4 days late, but I was going to make it right. Funny how the most ordinary afternoons become the ones you never stop replaying. I pulled up to the house on Remount Road. Rang the bell. Brianna answered. phone in one hand, barely looked up. Her eyes were red around the edges, the kind of red that could mean allergies or crying or something else entirely. I filed that away without knowing I was filing it. Hey, Brianna. Brought something for the reading champ. I know I'm a few days late. She's upstairs. She stepped back to let me in, already turning away. I've got to finish something. I stood in that entryway for a moment, holding my bag of books, feeling exactly like what I was. A grandfather who'd missed his granddaughter's proudest moment, showing up 4 days later trying to patch it with chapter books. Real smooth, Henry. I headed for the stairs. And right there, standing at the bottom with one hand on the railing, I felt it. Not heard it. Felt it. The thing that 47 years of fixing watches teaches you. When something is off, you don't always see it. Sometimes you feel it in your fingertips before your mind catches up. A vibration that shouldn't be there. A silence where there should be ticking. I couldn't name it yet, but my hands knew before my head did. Something in this house was off. I climbed the stairs slowly, not because of the arthritis, though it was there, always there, whispering in my knuckles like a song I never asked to learn. I climbed slowly because the feeling from the bottom of those stairs had followed me up, settling into my fingertips the way a bad vibration settles into a watch case. You can't point to it. You just know. Sophie's room was the second door on the left. She'd taped a sign to it herself, handwritten in purple marker, crooked and proud. Sophie's room. Please knock and wait. I almost smiled. Almost. I knocked twice. Sophie Bug. It's Grandpa. Silence. Then shuffling. Slow shuffling. The kind that belongs to someone waking from deep sleep. Not an 8-year-old on a Saturday afternoon. The door opened, and Sophie stood there, and something cold passed through my chest like a draft from a window that shouldn't be open. She looked wrong. Not fever wrong. Not runny nose and cough wrong. She looked heavy. Eyes half open, unfocused, like she was looking at me through a pane of frosted glass. Her pajama top was buttoned wrong, one side hanging lower than the other, and I could tell she hadn't changed since morning, maybe since yesterday. Grandpa. She smiled, but it arrived late, like a clock that ticks a half-second behind. Hey, reading champ. I kept my voice easy. Crouched down to her level, though my knees had opinions about that. Sorry I missed your ceremony, Bug. I heard you were incredible. She leaned against the doorframe. Not casually. The way you lean when you need something solid to hold you upright. I'm just tired. Tired. I glanced at my watch. 1:53 in the afternoon. I looked past her into the room. The bed was unmade. On the pillow, Buttons the bear sat propped against the headboard like a loyal guard. And on the nightstand, a book. Open. Face down. Page 3. I knew that book. I'd given it to her 2 months ago. Charlotte's Web. The same one she'd read at the ceremony. She'd finished it twice by then. And now it sat open on page 3 like it had been waiting there for days, abandoned mid-sentence by a girl who used to devour 3 chapters every single night before bed. I stepped inside and sat on the edge of her bed. Handed her the bag. She opened it slow. Slower than any 8-year-old opens a present. I'll tell you that. Her fingers fumbled with the tissue paper like they weren't entirely sure what to do. And when she pulled out the first book, she held it up close to her face and squinted, trying to read the title. She managed it, barely, and she smiled. A real one this time. Small and warm and completely her. Can I read it now? She asked. Of course you can. She opened to the first page. I watched her eyes move across the opening line. They made it halfway, then drifted, then came back, then drifted again, like a pendulum losing momentum. She blinked hard, rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand, and tried again. Same line. Same drift. She closed the book quietly, set it on the bed, and didn't say anything for a moment. Then she picked up Buttons, held him against her chest, and looked up at me. Really looked at me. The way she only does when she wants to make sure no one else can hear. When the world needs to shrink down to just the two of us. She leaned in close, both small hands gripping my sleeve, her breath warm and soft against my ear. "Grandpa," she whispered, "can you tell Mommy to stop putting the medicine in my juice box? I used to read 3 chapters before bed. Now I can't even finish one." The room didn't spin. My heart didn't crack open. I didn't grab her by the shoulders and make her say it again. Every gear inside me locked into place, tight and still, the way a mechanism freezes when something jams it from the inside. I just nodded, once, slow, like she'd told me the most ordinary thing in the world. "Okay, sweetheart." I stood up and held out my hand. "Let's go for a little ride. Just you and me and Buttons." She took my hand. Her fingers were so small inside mine. "I want you to understand something about me. I am not a loud man. I have spent 47 years working with mechanisms smaller than a thumbnail, pieces so delicate that one careless breath can throw them off. You don't fix a broken watch by slamming it on the counter. You listen first. You feel where the resistance is. You move with precision, not force." And that is exactly what I did, walking down those stairs with my granddaughter's hand in mine, and her whisper still echoing inside my skull. Brianna was on the couch, phone on her lap, eyes on the television, one arm draped over a cushion she was holding against her stomach. She didn't look up when we came down. "I'm going to take Sophie for a little treat," I said. Kept my voice the same temperature as the room. "Ice cream. Just us." She waved one hand without turning around. "Sure. Yeah, have fun." She didn't ask where, didn't ask how long, didn't look at her daughter. Filed that away too. I buckled Sophie into the back seat of the Buick. She held Buttons tight against her chest and looked at me through the rearview mirror with those slow, heavy eyes. "Are we really getting ice cream, Grandpa?" "After," I said. "First, we're going to see a friend of mine." I started the engine, pulled out of North Charleston, and I drove exactly the speed limit the whole way to Mount Pleasant. Not because I'm a careful driver, because if I went any faster, I was afraid the thing building inside my chest would get out before I was ready for it. The clinic on Coleman Boulevard was the closest pediatric urgent care I trusted. Dr. Carver had seen Sophie twice before, both strep throat, both times straight with me about what was happening and what wasn't. He knew her chart. More importantly, he didn't talk down to people. I walked in, told the front desk it was urgent, and when they called us back, I sat down across from Dr. Carver and told him exactly what Sophie had said, word for word. The whisper, the slow eyes, the way she'd moved all afternoon like her body was running on half power. The book opened to page 3. He didn't dismiss me, didn't give me the "oh, Grandpa's overthinking it" look. He looked at Sophie, who was sitting on the exam table swinging her legs, and holding Buttons like this was the most normal Saturday of her life, and he ordered a full panel. "Urine, blood, everything. We'll have something in about 40 minutes, he said. We waited. I have waited for a lot of things in 71 years. Waited for glue to cure. Waited for gears to seat. Waited in a hospital hallway while Martha fought the thing that eventually took her. I know how to wait. But those 40 minutes in that small room with the fluorescent lights humming and my granddaughter slowly sliding off the exam table and curling up against my chest, her breathing going deep and even, Buttons wedged between us, those 40 minutes were the longest of my life. At the 30-minute mark, she was out. Just gone. Like someone reached inside her and turned off a switch. And I sat very still, my hand on her back, feeling her ribs rise and fall, and I thought about that book open to page 3. 3 chapters every night. Now she couldn't finish one. Someone had stolen the words right out of my granddaughter's hands. Then the door opened, and Dr. Carver walked in with the results. And everything I've already told you happened exactly the way I told you. 5 heartbeats. Then the rest of my life. I carried Sophie out of that clinic, the way you carry something you're terrified of dropping. One arm under her legs, the other across her back. Buttons pinned between her chest and mine. She didn't stir. Not when I pushed through the door into the evening air. Not when I buckled her into the back seat. Not when the engine turned over and the Buick pulled onto Coleman Boulevard heading south. October in the Low Country has a smell. Salt and pluff mud and the last warmth of the year clinging to the air like it knows it's about to lose. I drove with the windows cracked and that smell filling the car, and I did not turn on the radio. Silence had work to do. 22 minutes. Sophie slept every one of them, mouth slightly open, buttons tucked under her chin, one hand curled into a loose fist, like even in sleep she was trying to hold on to something. I carried her inside, laid her down in the guest room, pulled the quilt up to her shoulders. Martha's quilt, made from old dress fabric, the year before she got sick. Set buttons on the pillow next to her. Stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. Rise, fall, rise, fall. Steady, safe. Then I closed the door softly and walked down the hall to my workshop. I need to tell you about this room. Small, barely 12 by 10, at the back of the house. Workbench along one wall, pegboard above it, every tool in its place, loops and tweezers and screwdrivers arranged by size, and clocks. Everywhere, clocks. Wall clocks, mantel clocks, a grandfather clock in the corner waiting for a new mainspring since August. Every single one of them ticking. Not in unison, never in unison, but together, a layered rhythm like rain on different surfaces. Martha used to say the room sounded like it was breathing. I sat down at the bench, pulled the chain on the desk lamp, and opened my logbook. Same book I've used for 30 years. Brown leather, graph paper inside, every repair cataloged in my own hand. I turned to a blank page, wrote the date at the top, Saturday, October 12th. And below it I began writing everything, not the way a detective writes, the way a watchmaker writes. Observations first, then sequence, then the question that matters most. Where is the broken gear? Sophie's teacher calling Marcus 2 weeks ago about focus. The birthday party in September where she'd fallen asleep before cake. Brianna's red eyes today. The book on page 3. The way Sophie leaned against the doorframe like her own bones were too heavy. Then what Dr. Carver had told me. Clonidine? Repeated administration. Beyond prescribed dosage. Not an accident. I sat back and looked at the clocks on the wall. Every clock in this room keeps time. But somewhere in that house on Remount Road, time had been stolen from a little girl. Night after night, one juice box at a time. I did not sleep. Henry Marshall does not fall apart. I sat in that workshop with the lamp on, and the clocks ticking, and I thought methodically, what do I know? What do I need to know? And what's the right sequence to find it out? Sunday morning, October 13th, 6:47 a.m. I called Marcus. Not to tell him everything. I needed to hear his voice first, take his temperature before I handed him something that would rearrange his entire life. He picked up on the third ring. Already awake. Marcus has always been an early riser. Got that from Martha, who used to say sleeping past 6 was a waste of good light. Hey Dad, everything okay? Everything's fine, son. How's Sophie been lately? You notice anything different? Pause. The kind that means he's actually thinking, not just filling space. Her teacher said she's been losing focus, and she's been tired a lot. Brianna thinks it might be an iron deficiency. She's been giving her vitamins. Iron deficiency. Vitamins. I held the phone very still. My son had looked his daughter in the face. Slow eyes, heavy limbs, falling asleep in the middle of the day, and filed it under iron deficiency because his wife told him to. That's not a bad father. That's a man standing too close to the painting to see what it actually looks like. There's a difference. Would it be all right if Sophie stayed with me for a week or two? Little grandpa time. I feel bad about missing the ceremony. I could hear him smile. Dad, she would love that. Let me check with Brianna. By 9:30, I was sitting across from Patricia Langford in her office on Broad Street. Silver hair cut short, reading glasses on a chain, wedding ring still on her left hand though her husband had passed 8 years before. She'd handled Martha's estate with quiet competence. I never forgot her name. I laid everything on her desk. The clinic visit, Dr. Carver's report, the photographs of the results. Patricia read without a word for 3 full minutes. Then she looked up. Henry, you understand what this is. Child endangerment. Possibly aggravated. She took her glasses off. Who else knows? You. The doctor. Me. Marcus? Not yet. She nodded slowly. Smart. Before you tell your son, you want documentation. He can't explain away. Because when a man hears this about his wife, the woman he stood beside through recovery, his first instinct won't just be denial. It'll be defense. He'll defend her before he defends his daughter, not because he loves Sophie less, but because admitting this means admitting he missed it. She was exactly right. What do I need? I asked. Medical records. Pharmacy records if you can trace them. A timeline, and eyes on the house. She slid a card across the desk. Calvin Webb. Private investigations. Charleston and Low Country. He's thorough, she said. And he's quiet. I pocketed the card. Then I leaned forward. One more question. The one that had been ticking in the back of my mind since I read the word clonidine on that results sheet. Patricia, can you check whether clonidine was ever prescribed to Brianna herself? During her recovery program, 4 years ago. She looked at me over her glasses. I watched the implication land. If Brianna had been prescribed clonidine during addiction recovery, and it's common, used to manage withdrawal, then she hadn't gone looking for this drug. It had already been in the medicine cabinet, sitting there, waiting. I'll have that answer by tomorrow afternoon, she said quietly. I drove home with Calvin Webb's card in my pocket, and a question that wouldn't stop ticking. If the drug was already in the house, then this wasn't calculated. It was desperate. And desperate meant something else entirely was happening behind the walls of that house on Remount Road. Sunday afternoon, I pulled up to the house on Remount Road for the second time in 2 days. This time, I wasn't carrying questions. I was carrying answers I hadn't told anyone yet, and a plan that was still taking shape the way a watch takes shape, one gear at a time. Brianna didn't come to the door. Marcus had texted me the code to the keypad. Sophie was waiting in the hallway with her backpack on, and buttons wedged under one arm, standing there like a little traveler ready for departure. Are we going to your workshop, Grandpa? We sure are, Bug. She smiled, not the delayed underwater smile from yesterday. A real one. Smaller than it should have been, but real. 1 night away from that house, 1 night of natural sleep, and already something was coming back. I buckled her in and pulled out of North Charleston. In the rearview mirror, the front door was closed. No one stood behind it. No one watched us leave. Filed that away. The next 2 days were quiet in the best sense of the word. Sophie settled into my house like she'd been waiting for permission to breathe. She sat in the workshop while I worked, buttons on her lap, watching me disassemble a pocket watch from 1942, asking questions about every gear and spring. She wanted to know what each piece did, why they were shaped that way, what happened when one of them broke. The whole thing stops, I told her. Even if it's just one tiny piece? Even if it's just one tiny piece. She thought about that for a while. Then she picked up her book, the new one I'd brought her, and she opened it to page 1. I watched from the corner of my eye, pretending to focus on a hairspring, but really I was counting. She made it through 1 page, then 2, then 3. Her eyes held steady. Her lips moved slightly with the words, the way they used to. 3 pages. Not 3 chapters, but 3 pages more than yesterday. I'll take it. If you've been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people listen without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. Hit that like button while you're at it, and drop your thoughts in the comments. We'll be right back. Tuesday evening, October 15th. Calvin Webb called at 6:12. Mr. Marshall, I've got something. You free to meet? How soon can you be at the place on King Street? 20 minutes. He was there in 17. Small restaurant near the corner of King and Calhoun, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and ceiling fans that turn too slowly to do anything useful. Calvin was already seated when I walked in. Stocky build, close-cropped hair, calm eyes, The kind of man who could sit in a room for 3 hours and no one would remember he'd been there. I imagine that's the whole point. He ordered coffee. I ordered the same. He slid a manila folder across the table. I opened it, expecting one thing. I found another. No hotel receipts. No pictures of another man in a suit. No affair. Instead, 3 photographs. Time-stamped. Clear. Brianna standing in a parking lot behind a pharmacy in Somerville, leaning into the window of a gray sedan. A man inside the car, heavy-set, ball cap pulled low. The second photo showed an exchange. Something small passed from his hand to hers. The third showed her walking back to her own car, head down, fast. The man's name is Jerome Price, Calvin said, both hands around his mug. He's known to local narcotics. Deals mostly in prescription opioids. Small time, but steady. I stared at the photographs. Calvin waited. He was good at waiting. She's not cheating on your son, Mr. Marshall. His voice was even. No judgment, no sympathy. Just the facts laid out on a checkered tablecloth. She's using again. He opened a second envelope. Inside, a photocopy of a prescription record from 4 years ago. Brianna's name, clonidine. Prescribed during her outpatient recovery program at a facility in Colombia. Standard protocol for managing withdrawal symptoms. Patricia's question, answered. The drug had already been in the house. In the medicine cabinet. Left over from the life Brianna had sworn she'd put behind her. Calvin continued. Based on what I can confirm, the relapse started approximately 6 to 7 months ago. The timeline of the clonidine use on your granddaughter appears to coincide almost exactly. She'd needed her nights. Sophie was always there, so she'd put her to sleep. I closed the folder. I sat with that for a long time. Calvin didn't rush me, didn't fill the silence, just drank his coffee and let me be a grandfather sitting with something no grandfather should ever have to carry. I'd been expecting cruelty. I'd been expecting selfishness. Some version of a woman who didn't care enough. What I got instead was sickness. The disease had come back, and it had swallowed her whole, and she'd fed it with the only quiet she could find, her daughter's sleep. And somehow, understanding that didn't make it better. It made it worse. Because cruelty you can hate cleanly. Sickness you can't. Sickness means the woman who held Sophie the day she was born, who looked me in the eye 4 years ago and promised she was done, who cried when she got her 6-month chip. That woman was still in there somewhere, buried under something she couldn't beat alone. But a sick woman who drugs her daughter is still a woman who drugs her daughter. Understanding doesn't change what happened. It only changes what you do next. I paid for the coffee, stood up, tucked the folder under my arm. Calvin, I'm going to need everything documented. Dates, times, locations, airtight, already working on it. I drove home on King Street with the windows down. Sophie was asleep in the guest room, buttons on the pillow, breathing steady. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I went to the workshop, opened the logbook, and wrote down everything Calvin had given me. I called Patricia and left a message. We're ready. Then I picked up the phone one more time and called my son. Not to tell him everything. Not tonight. Just 3 words. Son, I need you to come home. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Marcus pulled into my driveway around 7:15 Wednesday evening. Silver Honda Accord, the practical one he'd bought after Sophie was born because Brianna said they needed something reliable. He walked up to the porch with his jacket over one arm and the look of a man who thought he'd been called home for dinner, relaxed, unbothered, no idea. Sophie was already asleep in the guest room. I'd made sure of that. Read her 2 chapters of her new book, watched her eyes get heavy on the second one, natural heavy this time, not chemical heavy, tucked buttons under her arm and closed the door. What was about to happen at my kitchen table was not for 8-year-old ears. I'd cooked shrimp and grits. Low country style, the way Martha taught me, with andouille sausage and just enough cream to make you forget your troubles for 20 minutes. It's the meal I've made for Marcus every time life handed him something hard. When he failed his sophomore year finals, when his first business folded at 28, When Martha died, and he sat at this same table, with his face in his hands for an hour without saying a word. I never told him it was a ritual. He never noticed the pattern. Some things you do without explanation. You just do them. He came in, hugged me, looked around, breathed in deep. Something smells good, Dad. Where's Sophie? Asleep already. She's been doing better. Getting her color back. He smiled. Good. She needed this. You sounded different on the phone. Eat first, I said. He gave me the look. The same one he's been giving me since he was 12. The one that says you're being weird, Dad. But he picked up his fork. We ate. I let him finish. Let him have the grits and the second helping and the glass of sweet tea. I let him be comfortable one last time before I changed his life. The kitchen was quiet, except for forks on plates and the ticking of the wall clock above the stove. Martha's clock. A Seth Thomas from 1951. Oak case. Westminster chime. That I disconnected years ago because it went off at midnight and woke the whole house. The movement still ran, but it hadn't kept accurate time in months. I'd been meaning to fix it, kept putting it off. Funny, the things you let slide when you think you have all the time in the world. Marcus set his fork down, leaned back. All right, Dad. Talk to me. I didn't talk. I stood up, went to the counter, and I put 3 things on the table in front of him. Dr. Carver's medical report. The pharmacy records Patricia had helped me trace, including the original clonidine prescription from Brianna's recovery program in Colombia, and Calvin Webb's folder. I sat back down and I didn't say a single word. Let the evidence do the talking, Henry. You taught him that. Marcus looked at me, then at the papers. He picked up the medical report first, slowly. The way you pick something up, when you're not sure you want to know what it is. He read it. I watched his face. It didn't explode. Didn't crumble. It went still. Completely still. The way a clock goes still when the mainspring breaks. Not with a sound, but with an absence of one. He set it down. Picked up the pharmacy records. Read the prescription history. I saw the moment it connected. Clonidine. Brianna's name. Recovery program. 4 years ago. His jaw tightened, then released, then tightened again. He opened Calvin's folder. The photographs were on top. Brianna in the parking lot in Somerville. Jerome Price's gray sedan. The exchange. He looked at the first photo for a long time. Then he closed the folder. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear Martha's broken clock ticking unevenly on the wall. Tick. Tick. Silence. Tick. Marcus stood up. Very slowly. Very controlled. Excuse me for a minute, he said, and he walked through the back door onto the porch, and he stood there, facing the dark, both hands on the railing. I sat at that table and I waited. Take your time, son. Take all the time you need. 12 minutes. I know because Martha's clock, broken as it was, still counted. 12 minutes of my son, standing in the October dark, looking at the live oaks and the Spanish moss and whatever was left of the life he thought he'd built. I don't know what happened out there, whether he cried, whether he put his fist through the railing, whether he just stood and breathed and let the night hold the weight for a while. That was his time, not mine. When he came back in, his eyes were red. His voice was steady. He sat down, looked at the folder without touching it. Then he said, She told me she was clean, Dad. 4 years. I held her hand through every meeting, every craving, every night she woke up shaking. I drove her to Colombia every Saturday for 6 months. I believed her when she said she was done. He paused. She looked me in the eye and said she was clean. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that would make that sentence hurt less. Then he asked, Does Sophie know what was in the juice? No, I said. She just knows it made her feel like she can't read anymore, and she didn't like it. He nodded once. Slow. His jaw set like concrete. Good. She doesn't need to carry that yet. And right there, right in that moment, I saw my son clearly. Not the blindfolded husband. Not the man who'd filed his daughter's slow eyes under iron deficiency and gone back to his work. The father. The real one, underneath all the trust he'd extended to the wrong person. He was still in there. He just needed someone to hand him the truth. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Since Saturday. You sat on this since Saturday. I needed it airtight before I brought it to you. Didn't want to hand you something you could talk yourself out of." He was quiet. Then he let out a short breath, almost a laugh, the kind that has no humor in it at all. "You took the whole watch apart before you showed me what was broken." "Force of habit," I said. He looked at the folder one more time. Then he pushed it aside and pulled out his phone. "I need Patricia Langford's number." I gave it to him. He wrote it down on the back of a napkin, folded it once, put it in his shirt pocket. Then he looked at me. And I thought, but I did not say, "That's my son." Marcus didn't sleep that night. I know because I didn't either. I sat in my workshop with the lamp on, and through the wall I could hear him pacing in his old room. The floorboards in that house are heart pine, 140 years old, and they remember every footstep, back and forth, back and forth. The rhythm of a man rearranging everything he thought he knew. He spent the weekend at my house, slept in his old room, ate breakfast with Sophie, watched her carry buttons around the kitchen while he drank his coffee. Just watched her. The way you watch something precious when you've just learned how close you came to losing it. Saturday afternoon, Sophie sat in the workshop and read. I was cleaning a mainspring on the bench beside her, but really I was counting. She made it through one chapter, then half of another, 1.5 chapters, not 3 yet, but climbing. "Grandpa, listen to this part," she said, and she read me a full paragraph out loud without stopping, without drifting, without losing a single word. I told her that was the best thing I'd heard all week. I meant it more than she could know. While Sophie was occupied, I made 2 phone calls that needed making. The first was to Linda Webb, Brianna's mother, in Colombia. I'd met Linda 3 times. Quiet woman, strong hands, the kind of tired that comes from raising children in a place that doesn't make it easy. She picked up, and I told her who I was, and then I told her why I was calling. I didn't soften it. She deserved the truth, the same way Marcus had. The line went quiet for a long time. When she came back, her voice was broken in a way that only a mother's can be. I noticed her eyes, Linda said. Last time I visited. And the weight she'd lost, I told myself it was stress. Work, and the baby, and Marcus traveling. She paused. I knew. Somewhere in me I knew. I just didn't want to be right. None of us did, I said. We're getting Sophie safe. And we're going to get Brianna help. Real help. The second call was to Tom Ashford, Brianna's sponsor from the recovery program. Tom was a good man, 15 years sober himself, ran a Wednesday night group in West Ashley, had walked Brianna through her hardest months. When I told him, the silence on his end was different from Linda's. It wasn't grief. It was guilt. She stopped coming 6 months ago, Tom said. I called her, left messages. She always had a reason. Sophie was sick. Marcus was out of town. She'd come next week. His voice cracked. I should have pushed harder. 6 months. The same timeline Calvin had mapped. Everything aligned like gears meshing in a movement. One tooth catching the next, pulling the whole thing forward. Marcus spent the rest of the weekend preparing. Called Patricia twice. Moved money into a separate account Saturday morning. Photographed documents in the house on Remount Road, while Sophie was with me. Everything methodical. Everything precise. He learned that from somewhere. Sunday night, late. I was walking past the guest room when I saw him standing in the doorway, one hand on the frame, looking in at Sophie sleeping. Buttons on the pillow. The quilt pulled up to her chin. Her breathing steady and deep and clean. I should have seen it, he said, barely above a whisper. I was right there in that house. Every morning, every night. And I didn't see it. I stood behind him in the hallway. You trusted, I said. That's not the same as failing. He didn't turn around. But I saw his shoulders shift. Something releasing. Not all of it. Maybe not even most of it. But enough to let him breathe. Monday morning, October 20th. I drove Sophie to school myself, walked her to the door, signed her in, watched her disappear down the hallway with buttons sticking out of her backpack because she refused to leave him in the car. The teacher smiled. Sophie waved at me through the window. I waved back and held that image for as long as I could. Marcus drove to North Charleston alone. He told me everything that evening, word for word, and I'm going to tell it to you the same way he told it to me. Brianna was sitting at the kitchen table when he walked in. Hair pulled back, coffee mug in her hands, laptop open. A Monday morning like any other. She looked up when he came in and smiled. The easy smile of someone who doesn't know the floor is about to disappear. Marcus sat down across from her. He slid the medical report across the table. She looked at it, looked at him, and he watched the smile dissolve. She started talking immediately. That was the first thing he noticed. Not a question. Not, what is this? An explanation. Already explaining before she even knew how much he knew. Marcus, I can explain. She was having trouble sleeping and I just thought, he said nothing. Let the silence sit for 10 full seconds. Then he placed the pharmacy records on the table. Then Calvin's photos. She looked at the photos of herself in that parking lot in Somerville, and she went completely still. Then she broke. Not the way people break in movies, with screaming and throwing things. She folded, shoulders curving in, hands shaking around the coffee mug, tears running down her face without sound, like a building coming down from the inside. I tried to stop, she said. I tried so many times. You don't know how many times I threw them out. Swore it was the last time. Sat in my car in the driveway and told myself I was done. Marcus's voice never rose. Not once. I believe you tried, he said. But you chose the pills over our daughter. Every single night. You made that choice. Are you taking her from me? Marcus stood up, picked his keys off the counter, looked at her one last time. You need help, Brianna. Real help. Not the kind you can fake. And he walked out. He told me later that the hardest part wasn't the conversation. It was the drive home. Looking in the rearview mirror as he pulled away from Remount Road. The front door still open. The kitchen light still on. And Brianna still sitting at that table, alone, hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had gone cold a long time ago. I want to tell you how it ended. Not the version with music swelling and credits rolling. The real version. The one with paperwork and waiting rooms and a 71-year-old man driving a woman he should hate to a place that might save her life. Real justice doesn't come with a soundtrack. It comes with file numbers and court dates, and a whole lot of sitting in chairs that weren't built for comfort. But it comes. Full temporary custody was awarded to Marcus 60 days after he walked out of that house on Remount Road. Patricia Langford put Dr. Carver on the record. She put the toxicology screen in front of the judge. She put 7 months of pharmacy records, traced and documented, on the table. She put Calvin Webb's surveillance file beside them. The judge reviewed everything. He didn't need long. Supervised visitation, only for Brianna. Pending completion of court-mandated treatment. Inpatient rehabilitation. 90 days minimum. Beaufort, South Carolina. At a facility on Ladies Island that specialized in mothers. That was Patricia's doing. She'd found the place. Said it mattered where someone fell apart and tried to put themselves back together. Child endangerment charges were filed. Brianna's attorney argued relapse, mental health, extenuating circumstances. The judge listened. Then he looked at the records, and he looked at the timeline, and he said what needed saying. Jerome Price was arrested in a separate narcotics operation 2 weeks later. He never knew his name appeared in a custody file. Didn't matter. He was done, either way. The day before Brianna was scheduled to check in at Beaufort, Marcus called me. Dad, she doesn't have anyone to drive her. Linda's working. Tom offered, but she said no. He paused. Would you take her? I sat with that for a moment. The man who had spent the last 5 weeks building a case to protect his granddaughter was now being asked to drive the woman who'd put that granddaughter at risk to the place where she might get well. There's a word for that kind of contradiction. I think the word is family. I'll pick her up at 8, I said. She was waiting on the porch of the apartment she'd rented after the separation. Small place off Rivers Avenue. No seasonal wreath on the door. One suitcase. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not just thinner, smaller. Like the life she'd been holding up had finally been set down, and without it she didn't know how much space she was supposed to take up. She got in the Buick, without a word. I pulled onto the highway heading south, toward Beaufort. For the first 20 minutes, neither of us said anything. The low country unfolded outside the windows, marsh grass and tidal creeks and herons standing still as sculptures in the shallow water. Then she spoke. Quietly, looking straight ahead. Why are you doing this? After everything? I kept my eyes on the road. I thought about Sophie, about the book open to page 3, about the whisper, about every juice box and every stolen night, and every morning my granddaughter woke up feeling like the world was made of fog. And then I thought about something else, about Brianna 4 years ago, sitting in my kitchen the day she got her 6-month chip, holding Sophie on her lap, crying and smiling at the same time, saying, "I'm never going back, Henry. I swear to God I'm never going back." I prayed that morning, before I started the car. Sitting in my driveway with both hands on the wheel, I asked the Lord for something I couldn't find on my own. Not anger. I had plenty of that. Not patience. 47 years of watchmaking had given me more than enough. I asked for the wisdom to know the difference between a person and the thing that had broken them. Because my granddaughter needs a mother worth coming back to, I said. And broken things can be fixed, if you let them. She didn't say anything. But I saw her hands tighten on the suitcase in her lap. And when I pulled into the facility on Ladies Island and she opened the door, she looked at me one last time. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say sorry. She just nodded. And I nodded back. Marcus called me that night. We talked for a long time about nothing important, the way fathers and sons do when the important things have already been said. Near the end, his voice got quiet. "Do you think she'll make it, Dad?" "Only God knows that, son. But she's in the right place, and Sophie's in the right place, and that's all we can control." I heard him breathe out. "Yeah, okay. December." The year leaning toward its end the way the low country leans toward winter, slowly, gently, without much drama. Sophie had been with Marcus full-time for 2 months. She was back in school. Her teacher said the focus had returned. The reading was back. One evening, she came to my workshop after dinner. This had become our routine. She'd sit in the chair beside the bench, buttons on her lap, and read while I worked. Sometimes she'd ask questions about the mechanisms. Sometimes she'd just read. That night, she opened her book, and she didn't look up for a long time. I was working on the wall clock, Martha's Seth Thomas, the one that had been ticking out of rhythm for months. I'd finally found the time to open the case, clean the movement, replace the worn pivot that had been throwing the whole thing off. One small piece. One tiny gear, no bigger than a lentil, that had been carrying a crack nobody could see. I set it right, closed the case, hung it back on the wall, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, the ticking was even, steady, true. Sophie looked up from her book, smiled. "Grandpa, I finished 3 chapters." I looked at her, and I looked at Martha's clock, and I looked at my hands, these old arthritic hands that had taken apart 1,000 broken things and put most of them back together. Sophie prayed for her mother that night. She told me at the door of the guest room, matter of fact, the way children deliver the most enormous things in the smallest packages. "I prayed for Mommy last night, Grandpa. I asked God to fix what's broken inside her." I didn't trust my voice to answer right away. So I just kissed her forehead and pulled the quilt up and set buttons on the pillow where he belonged. Every clock in my workshop keeps time. Every gear has its purpose. Every spring has its tension. Every pivot has its place. Some of them break. Some of them wear down so thin you can see through them. But if you're patient, and if you're careful, and if your hands are steady enough, most of them can be set right again. Not all of them. I won't lie to you about that. Some damage runs too deep. Some mechanisms are past saving. But you don't know which ones until you try. And trying, the real kind, the kind that costs you something, that's not weakness. That's the bravest thing a pair of hands can do. If this story touched something in you, I'm glad. That's why we do this. If you've been where Henry's been, or Marcus, or even Brianna, know that you're not alone. And if you're holding someone right now the way Sophie held Buttons, hold on tight. The people who hold on are the ones who make it through. Share your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your moment. We've got more stories coming, real ones, raw ones, the kind that remind you what family actually means when the easy answers run out. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening all the way through. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.